Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. So today I'm going to have as my guest, Ruth Poniarski, and let me tell you a little bit about Ruth and her history. So Ruth was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1956. She grew up in Glen Cove, Long Island, and attended public schools. But when she was 7 years old, her mother took her to a life drawing class where she depicted a sketch of a nude woman. From the moment onward, she became a keen observer of the physical world and was drawn to art as well as built environments. In 1974, Ruth decided to enroll in an architecture program at a college in upstate New York. In her fourth year at the college, her life became a living hell, beginning with innocently eating a brownie that was baked with angel dust, PCP, at an intimate party, and her existence became overwhelmed with a series of death-defying nervous breakdowns while struggling to complete college, entering a male-dominated workforce, searching for her soulmate, true friendships, and a sense of belonging, and realizing her trapped creative potential through it all. Today, we're going to talk to Ruth about realizing coping patterns and habits. How did she discover these things, and how did that help to change her life? So please join me in welcoming my guest, Ruth Poniarski. Ruth, you have such a, oh my gosh, it's a movie type of story.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
You
definitely.
should sell the movie rights for sure. But we asked two simple questions. I gave where you had been living. So tell us now, where do you call home now?
Call home now, Westbury, Long Island, New York, which is about 25 minutes from Glen Cove.
So you stayed around the same home?
I stayed around, but before that, I lived in Staten Island for 6 months. I looked at, and then we moved back with my husband. And we've been here for, at least 37 years.
Oh,
So,
wow. Wow.
yeah. And that's how long we've been married. So I found Mr. Right through all of this.
I know. So your story, I'm telling you, it has to be a book. All right. Oh, it is a book, but it has to be a movie for sure. Excuse me. So I gave just like the highlights. If you could just share a little bit more about your story.
Okay, well, that fateful night at that intimate party, I had nothing to eat all during the party. So at the end of the party, when everybody left, I was friendly with the host and his roommate. He gave me this succulent brownie cake laced with angel dust PCP. Innocently, I had no idea. I ate it, and after that, I hallucinated. And I saw a bed of white candles in a cavernous space. My head was spinning. Took me about an hour and a half resting just to have it die down, calm down a little bit. But let me give you what happened 2 years before that. In my sophomore year, we had a clique of architecture students together, like a group of 9 of us. and we would have little parties and smoke marijuana. For the first half of my sophomore year, I smoked a lot of marijuana.
Mm.
And doing that, it left me with a pattern of low self-esteem,
Yeah.
insomnia, which wasn't that great, struggling in my studies, being very passive, and losing sight of small goals.
Yeah.
So coupled that, and that lingered, didn't go away. It lingered, and when the time came when I ingested the PCP angel dust, together the combination set me off.
Mm. Where were those two boys that invited you to this party during all this?
Okay, so they were there, and they never, the gentleman who gave it to me had no clue of how I would be reacting so seriously.
Mm.
So he was manipulative. He wanted to be more than just a friend.
Yeah.
And I was a friend. That was it for me.
Yeah.
And anyway, so after that, I had my first breakdown.
Mm.
I left the apartment. I got in my car and I started driving aimlessly. Ideation took over my head, paranoid. I imagined that there was a war going on between the socialists and capitalists. That emanated from a course that I was taking in college, how socialism affected the architectural environment, the built environment, especially in
Mm.
Europe, all of the European architecture.
Yeah.
So different from our architecture. So that got in my head socialism and capitalism. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I drove to the New York State Thruway,
Mm.
and I thought that I can drive to my boyfriend who never returned that year, which left me alone. I really was a buddy with my boyfriend in my junior year. He was continents apart from me. He was in Europe and I was in America. So that was the end of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that lingered. And I thought his brother went to a college in Poughkeepsie. I thought maybe I could go down to his brother, But that didn't work. I changed my mind. I went back and forth, getting off the highway, on the highway. Meanwhile, my ideation was getting worse. I thought that my people, my friends and relatives, were leaving in spaceships to escape the revolution. This is all going on in my head.
Wow.
I went to the highway again. I drove to the highway. I parked my car on the shoulder of the highway. I abandoned my car and walked 12 miles on the shoulder of the highway
Mm.
till dawn, till light came. Then for a moment, reality kicked in. I hitched a ride back to the college town, 12 miles north. The driver let me off in the beginning of the town. He didn't want to be caught with me. I walked about 5 city blocks to my apartment, and my frazzled father was there, my two female roommates, and the two male who gave me the angel
The
dust,
brownie.
the brownie. I had to abandon my studies. My father took me to a psychiatrist on Long Island, near Glen Cove, where they lived. My father had to hold me in the car with his arm so I didn't jump out of the car.
So
That was the
scary.
hardest journey for him to take since World War II. He was a veteran of World War II.
Mm.
I got to the office to the psychiatrist. I got into the office, sat down. I was silent because I was still feeling a revolution going on, and I didn't want to, I was going to be captured. Sat there for 20 minutes. Then the doctor informed my father that I had a nervous breakdown.
Mm.
I didn't need to be hospitalized, but I had stayed home. It took me about 3 or 4 days to finally sleep. The insomnia was so much, how like if you have a lack of sleep, it's hard to get to sleep because you're on a manic energy.
Yeah.
which happened periodically through nervous breakdowns over a period of 7 years.
Mm.
I recovered after 3 weeks. My mother helped me out. I had 3 meals a day, very structured. We would do art projects together.
Mm.
Slowly, therapeutically, I got better. I re-entered an architecture program in Brooklyn, New York for the winter spring semester. And it didn't go away. I was
Mm.
okay in between episodes, but when an episode came on, it was a pattern of insomnia, severe low self-esteem, loss of hope,
Mm.
thinking that everybody was advancing ahead of me. And then I would periodically think 30 years ahead of me, thinking that I was abandoned and alone in an
Mm.
apocalyptic world. That was a pattern in my brain that developed more and more over the next 7 years.
Mm.
Other breakdowns included, um, well, they included during school. I had another 2 years before I completed college life,
Mm.
but I would like just fade out. I would just, and it would happen. It would be instigated by a social situation.
Okay.
Like I was afraid that I was too personal and people could see through
Mm.
my mental illness. And that would further compound my nervous breakdowns.
Mm.
It would last for about 3 weeks at a time. But serious breakdowns, I mean, really life-defying, occurred after college.
Yeah.
One,
You on your website, and y'all need to go to her website because she has great illustrations of it. But you talked about the throughway, but then you said you went to Europe
yes,
and
that was after college. I mean, yes, after college, or like the last year, I went to a party of a friend, and she had a couple there who had visited Greece, and they were enthralled with Greece. And of course,
mm,
the architecture is like amazing.
yes.
So I was so excited. I planned this trip alone, going alone on a tour in the month of all in the summer. I went there. It was a trip that was about the ancient Greek ruins in inland
Yeah.
Greece.
Yeah.
It was a very tedious tour. I don't know if you've been to Greece or not, but it was
Yeah.
very tedious, very talked about these ruins one after another. The bus would go to one day, and then we would go to a hotel, and then the next day we would go. And I was very alone on this bus tour. They were mainly Europeans who spoke their own language.
Mm,
There was a gentleman about maybe 55, 60 years old. He was American. I befriended him, but I really felt very alone.
mm,
And I just, and then there was a French couple there that was really not accepting of me. They kind of insulted me. So that
mm.
kind of set off another
Trigger.
trigger of
Mm-hmm.
breaking down. I lost 7 nights of sleep. Couldn't sleep for 7 nights. The insomnia, the paranoia, thinking that my parents were gone off the earth, the whole thing. I got back, the tour started in Athens, and then I returned to Athens. Well, the sixth day, that night, I couldn't sleep. The air conditioner was rattling and making noise. It was a rundown hotel. I decided to walk at 12 midnight the city of Athens. Very dangerous.
Yeah.
And on my walk, I picked up a Greek soldier, uniformed soldier. He asked me for a light for a cigarette, and I said, "I'm sorry, I don't have a light." He said, "Let me walk you through Athens." We walked all through Athens, through horrible neighborhoods, through great neighborhoods. And then about 6 a.m. in the morning, he brought me back to my hotel. I grabbed my bag of things, my baggage. I took a taxi to the airport and I got an attendant there. I told them that I was sick and I had to return to New York immediately. I was they booked me on the next flight to New York, which would not happen today.
No, it would not.
They booked me on the next plane to New York. I was on the plane in a paranoid state, thinking that everybody could see through me. I hadn't washed, hadn't had new clothing for days, hadn't eaten really that much.
Oh,
I was sitting there with a young woman next to me, and she was trying to talk to me, and I was silent. I was mute. Then I thought that the gentleman in back of me, sitting in back of me, was making fun of me and talking about me. I got up, I looked at him, and then I slapped him in the face.
oh,
Now, everybody was shocked. They thought there was going to be a brawl on the plane. I
yeah,
got up, I immediately ran down the aisle and went up the stairs. It was a two-decker plane, a 747. Went up the plane, up to the second level where the first class was
yeah.
located.
Mm-hmm.
I grabbed a seat and I sat there. And I sat there. The attendant came over and he said, "Would you like a piece of cake?" And I hadn't eaten. I said, "Yes, I would like a piece of cake." Now they thought I was high on heroin or something like that. Or
Oh,
they thought I was tripping.
yeah.
That wasn't the case. Back in this is back in 1980.
Mm,
At that time, it wasn't open about mental illness.
yeah, yeah,
Medication was sparse. Therapy wasn't that developed. It
right.
wasn't open. It wasn't talked about.
And
So
there
there
was
was
a lot of
no,
drugs going on.
and a lot of drugs. So they
A
had
lot
no
of drugs.
clue. They
Yeah.
had no clue.
Mhm.
Anyway, so the plane landed in New York. Everybody departed the plane. I sat there. The police came up and handcuffed me and brought me to the Police Transportation Authority in the airport.
Mm.
And the sergeant there said, "You're lucky the gentleman did not press charges."
Oh, wow.
So my father came, my poor father. He was always the one to rescue me. My mother
Oh,
couldn't handle it.
yes.
My father was always there. He brought me back to the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist didn't really do much, didn't say much. He just said, you don't have to be hospitalized. You shouldn't be alone tonight. So my father and we went back to my apartment in a town kind of like 20 minutes away from Glen Cove. He stayed the night. I couldn't sleep. I just could not sleep. That was the biggest problem in this whole pattern and habit of what was occurring. Couldn't
Mm-hmm.
sleep. So I went back to my parents' house the following day. My mother took me in. We did art projects or whatever. I eventually got my sleep. The medication that was administered to me was Thorazine. Now, Thorazine was like the main medication at that time, and also Haldol. Those were the only two.
Mm-hmm.
Thorazine helped me eventually get sleep, eventually. Then I returned. I think I would return in 1980. I had been working in a firm. I worked in many firms in New York City. I went from one job to another,
Yeah.
never really climbing the ladder in the firms. I always was given rudimentary drafting tasks, which I really wasn't the greatest drafter.
Mm.
Great designer. I'm very creative and I was a great designer. But to work yourself up in an architecture firm to be a designer could take years,
Yeah.
and very disciplined at
Yeah.
drafting, which I was not. That counted against me.
Mm.
Another thing was it was a male-dominated field. So as a
Yeah.
woman, you really had to prove yourself. You really
Mm.
had to be top notch. I wasn't. and I wasn't really taken seriously. The management in architecture firms were not that good. They didn't know how to really manage their
people.
employees. That was one thing that was really lacking in an architecture firm.
Yeah.
I had managed in 1983. I had managed to work by then about a year and a half at an architecture firm. I didn't do that well. I lingered and lingered. And then they were having a Christmas party. This was now winter in 1983. Again, I felt isolated, low self-esteem. I was lacking sleep. I was living with my boyfriend for about a year and a half at that point, who really he didn't love me. He didn't really know how to deal with what I was going through.
Yeah.
He had no clue what was mentally challenged in me.
And all through this, were you still seeing regularly any doctors?
Yes, the psychiatrist who I had first seen, I was seeing till 1984. He wasn't that good. He wasn't that effective with me. He was evasive. Never really said, Ruth, you have limitations. Realize your limitation. Realize that you may have too much stimulus in your life. I had many acquaintances, many, many friends, always dating, always looking for Mr. Right. Too many friends, too much stimulus. I didn't take my time slowly and think out and think small goals and just take a day at a time.
Right.
When I was going through these episodes, I would think 30 years ahead. That was the pattern. Always thinking that I was going to be annihilated. I was going to be abandoned to a world that was just a wilderness, isolated, alone. I was thinking that everybody else was moving ahead in their lives. I lost hope periodically in every 6 months to a year and the stimulus was oftentimes I felt that people could see through me and see my mental breakdowns that I was ashamed of. Quite frankly, I was ashamed. I thought I was inadequate. And my boyfriend also thought I was inadequate. He thought,
oh, that's great.
so that didn't help. But
no.
What happened was at that Christmas Eve, Christmas Eve, my boyfriend was going to Florida to visit his parents, leaving me alone. And I was pacing back and forth in the apartment, just out of my mind. Very little sleep, agitated, paranoid, manic energy, manic. My father came and my boyfriend left. And I went down to the garage. My father couldn't stop me. I broke his trying to stop me. I went through the door, went downstairs to the basement garage of the apartment building. I took the car and I drove aimlessly to Kennedy Airport, thinking that I was going to go to Israel and escape this country, go to Israel. I went back and forth in the airport. Finally, I left the airport and said, I can't, and it's impossible. I parked my car by Jamaica Bay, Queens, New York. Got out of my car. I stood in the ice cold snow for about 7 hours from midnight till dawn. Just stood there in the coldest night. Must have been 17 degrees out.
Wow.
Finally, the police came because they looked up. It was a rental car that I had because I had been in a slight accident. So it was a rental car. And my father had called the police missing persons. Well, the police came and discovered the rental car. They looked it up. And I saw them and I walked towards the car. They brought me to Jamaica Hospital. My feet were frostbitten, a
Oh,
little
wow.
black on my feet. Then my father came and he hired an ambulance to take me to a private hospital in a town near where I had lived.
Mm-hmm.
It took 3 weeks in the hospital in the psychiatric ward. I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk. I got better. I was in a wheelchair for another 3 or 4 weeks when I was home. I had to learn how to apply topical dressing and ointment to my feet so they wouldn't be
Yeah.
infected.
Mm-hmm.
I got it out of that. And then in February or January, I returned to work, but I started a new job. That didn't go well either. And then about the fall of 1984, I found an engineering firm that designed highways and parking lots. I went to that firm and I did moderately well. I wasn't talking and revealing my personal life to my workers. I kept to myself, worked, and it actually was getting better.
Mm.
But a former workmate from another firm was doing this psychological workshop and invited me to attend. A month went by. I asked the boss of this highway firm if I could have 3 days off to attend this psychological workshop. He said, sure you can. I went to the psychological workshop on a Wednesday. I had no idea that it was a confrontational workshop. I
Oh.
thought it was just lectures on how to be assertive, different people coming in and talking about their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like that. It was
Mm.
confrontational exercises. Got me stressed out. I was
Yeah.
already compromised with a low self-esteem
Yeah.
and my troubles and my history. I was compromised. And I thought again that they were all against me. This delusion, this paranoia. The second day I struggled through, could hardly make it. The third day, Friday, I called my psychiatrist, my evasive psychiatrist. He said, don't return to the workshop. I didn't return to the workshop. They tried to coerce me to return, which was very unnerving. And
Yeah.
then my partner, this really kind of abrasive partner that I had, came out from the city to my apartment, knocked on the door, and said, you have to return to the workshop, you spoiled bitch.
Oh, jeez.
And I said to myself, oh my God, I froze. I froze. I didn't let him in. I didn't say anything or nothing. Finally, he left. I hadn't slept by then. That was Friday for 3 nights.
Mm.
Then the weekend, I couldn't sleep. And unfortunately, the apartment next to me, they were renovating. So there was a constant drilling sound, and whatever.
Yeah.
So that kind of set me off.
Right.
I imagined that people were against me and they were going to persecute me. And had I left the front door of my apartment, they would murder me, they would kill me. I was a pariah in society. I was imagining
Mm.
I was guilty about my sexual self. I was guilty about things that I said, that I imagined that I said, that was wrong against people. I was just further and further getting into this cycle of insomnia and paranoia.
Mm-hmm.
Monday came, and Tuesday morning, I barged into my psychiatrist's office, which was about 20 minutes from where I was living, 25 minutes. He said to me he had other crisis patients and that I should return on my designated time, which was a Thursday night. I went back. I was screaming inside. I couldn't communicate to him that I wasn't sleeping, that I was depressed. that I was paranoid. I couldn't, it just didn't cross that wall to communicate to him, to contact him, to say that I was going through this. He never asked me about my sleep, which was really the catalyst to this whole situation.
Yes.
So Wednesday came, it was Halloween. And that night I said to myself, I'm going to go out the apartment window. I tied my bed sheets together, tied one end to the steel post of my kitchen table, went 6 feet to the window with this rope, took the screen off the window, climbed out the window thinking that I could rappel down the wall with this rope. When I got outside the window, I was hanging on. The force of the gravity was so intense, so like I was dead weight being pulled down by chains of iron. I said a prayer for about 5 seconds. I planned my fall. I fell 25 feet to 30 feet, landed on my feet, and rolled to my side.
Oh my goodness.
I blacked out, unconscious, and then I woke up in the emergency room at the hospital where the psych ward was, but I wasn't in that department. I was in the emergency room. I had broken my back and both my ankles.
Oh, wow.
12 hours of surgery, 2 months in the hospital, 1 month in critical care and 1 month in a rehab hospital in New York City. Rusk, the first rehabilitation hospital in America, Rusk in New York City. I had left the psychiatrist. I had entered a lawsuit with this psychiatrist. I found another psychiatrist through the psychiatry department in NYU, which was connected to Rusk Institute. This psychiatrist finally was the right one. He was a Quaker, a veteran of World War II. He was a common sense doctor.
Yeah.
He communicated during therapy sessions. He talked common sense, different from the Freudian style psychiatrist that I had been seeing for 7 years. The Freudian psychiatrist never offered common sense, never offered any insight to my youthful youth that I would talk about. He never emphasized I had limitations. The right doctor, his name was George, he had essays on how to have a good sleep regimen, vitamin regimen, even investing your money, healthy relationships, all kinds of essays that he wrote. And he instilled common sense. When to drink coffee and when not to drink coffee. No alcohol. Not that I drank a lot of alcohol, but he said no alcohol. Stay away from stimulants. Common sense. He said, don't travel to Europe anymore alone, which I did a few times. And take a day at a time. And then he said, take the load lightly and don't put bunions in your head. The bunions, thinking 30 years ahead of myself. Take a day at a time, an hour at a time.
Right. Small goals.
Small goals. And eventually, the breakdowns occurred 3 years apart, 4 years apart. In 1999, I was hospitalized because I had really serious incidents with George, but they were spaced apart. But I couldn't shake that pattern, and my episodes were very serious. I ended up in the hospital in 1999. This doctor in the ward gave me a medicine, Zyprexa, which addressed psychosis. It was a very effective medication. I broke down less. I had another incident in like 2004. And then in 2010, the right dosage of the medication. Believe it or not, it took a long time to realize the right dosage.
Yeah, yeah.
And since 2010, I have been break free.
Nice. So
In
good to know.
2010, I started writing my memoir. Took me a long time to write it. First, it was 400 pages. I sent it to an editor. I had to break it down to 200 pages. It went through a long process, but in that process, I was able to ascertain my habits, my patterns, looking at myself as a third person,
Yeah.
looking at the bubble that I was in. And I was able to analyze and see the patterns. Excuse me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to see and feel the patterns. And I eventually, with the medication and with the writing, I broke the pattern.
Nice.
Anytime I would feel racing in my head, I would talk about it. I would call my father. I would talk about it to George. I would talk about it to my husband, to a friend. Just talk it out.
Yeah.
Talk it out. And eventually, I broke it.
So
Anytime
what about the art?
oh yeah, so the art,
Yeah, because
sure.
your art is, and y'all need to go and visit her website. It's almost dreamlike. And I'd love for you to also answer why in all of the pieces you have an animal
I
picture.
love animals. If I haven't come back to a second life, I'd love to be a farm with the animals. I love animals. I grew up with dogs. I had 5 dogs during my marriage. And I love the animal, the jungle, and the leopards, and the lions, and the rabbits, and all kinds of animals. And to me, they're like another being in the paintings.
Yeah.
They promote a meaning, a poetic meaning with the narrative of the paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy painting them as much as loving them and depicting them.
In some of them, it's as if you are transformed into the one I'm thinking of, especially is you become the lion in the painting.
Yeah, you become it. They become a human, a being, an
Mm-hmm.
essence, a meaning.
Yeah.
I started painting in 1988 through the suggestion of George. He says, "Why don't you take up painting?" And then at that point, I gave up architecture. I had a few successes in architecture. Don't get me wrong. In 1987, I renovated my father's 3,000 square foot office space. I designed a lingerie store. I renovated my parents' house. I did all those things. But I did not return to working in a corporate atmosphere. I forgone that,
Mm-hmm.
gave that up. And that stress of the
Yeah.
corporate left. I just left that. And I was
Mm-hmm.
able to really delve into my creative self and my manic energy. I
Yeah.
focused on my painting.
Yeah.
And the painting took a lot of discipline because it's I have to depict people realistically, animals realistically, storytelling, a
Mm-hmm.
story developed in the painting. It took a lot of discipline to do that.
Yeah. But I could see how it would help you in your journey to really come to an understanding of feelings that you were having, because each of those kind of, as you read your poetry and your headings for them, you can see there was some trigger, something that made you want to paint that at that very moment.
Oh, yes, yes. And also it reflects daily life, the daily life. I take out of the daily life and I make it into a poetic narrative where there are a lot of interpretations you can apply to the painting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's storytelling. And
Yes.
then after I also developed my writing, I wrote a fiction book like my paintings.
Mm-hmm.
The creative part, the creative plots and everything going on mirrors my paintings.
Yeah. And so I think the interesting thing is you took that stimuli that was sort of imprisoning you from being all that you could be to now using it as a creative force to just becoming so much more in your life.
Absolutely. I took all of my patterns, all of my negative, and I made it into a
Yeah.
positive. I
Yeah.
took adversity and made it into, through experience of life, into my paintings. I put it into my paintings.
Yeah. Well, time has flown by. I told you guys that this was an interesting story. We could probably talk for much longer, but I am going to share the screen that has the contact information so Ruth can tell you a little bit about her book and how to get in touch with her. So let me share that screen. So for those of you that are just listening, she has two websites. One is called Battling Mental Illness Alone.com. Again, Battling Mental Illness Alone.com. Or she has her own website, which is just her name, Ruth Poniarski. That's PONIARSKI.com. RuthPoniarski.com. LinkedIn is her name, as well as Instagram, so you can see her on those two social media platforms. And I'm going to turn it over to Ruth to explain some of the things you'll find on her battlingmentalillnessalone.com, as well as her Ruth Poniarski's. Go ahead, Ruth.
Okay, great. On the Battling Mental Illness Alone, you'll have 4 pictures of the actual sites where I had my serious life-defying breakdowns. You'll also see artwork on there. And also I have other podcasts that I've been on. You can visit podcasts and hear me. And also on my ruthponiarski.com, I have more artwork, a couple of poems. I've got the resume that shows my history of education and podcasts that I've done and where I've been written up in several publications.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just learn just about my history of the development of how I got to painting through my resume.
Mm-hmm.
And my book is on there. You could click on book under the website. I have editorials that have been written about my book.
Yeah.
And you could just click on Amazon there and you could buy a copy of my book. My book covers 7 years, 1977. Oh no, 10 years, 1977 to 1987. That's what the book covers of my life through those the evasive psychiatrist that I had to George, the most accomplished, great psychiatrist that I had. And it covers that. And there are more breakdowns to read about. And you read that how I became out of this horror, out of these horrible events, how I managed to survive and discern these patterns of destruction, self-destruction.
Yeah. Ruth, it's been so wonderful chatting with you. You shared a lot of terrifying moments as well as some real insight into how the mind can control our lives so much. And
Absolutely. You know, the mind is everything.
yeah,
Forget about our
it is.
physical selves. The
Yeah.
mind is the organ of this
Yeah.
earth.
Yeah. So if you are interested in learning more, please do go visit either of those sites and definitely take advantage of picking up that book, which does go into far more details of some other breakdowns that will, again, hold your interest throughout. So Ruth, thanks so much for being a great guest.
Thank you for having me.
As always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling, signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.